Alrighty, hello world history students. We have a lecture here on feudalism. I know you are really excited for that, so let's jump right in. Hope you have your notes ready, and we'll make it as wonderful and quick and painless as possible. All right, so first point, let's talk about what feudalism is. And basically, it's the political system that Europe developed when basically there was no political system. When Rome had just fallen, there is no longer a nation. There is no longer a series of laws. There's none of the structure, political, economic, or even moral structure that you associate with having a society. That had all kind of fallen into disarray. And so feudalism is what comes in to replace that. And what it all basically is a system, a bond of mutual assistance. So imagine, again, apocalyptic movie, society falls apart, and then people start to form relationships in order to help each other, because where else are you going to get help for? There isn't the normal policeman, fire department, city council kind of help that you have. And so feudalism is that like kind of emergency, close at hand, help me survive support system. And it's basically a relationship between a superior, who is known as the lord, and an inferior, who's known as a vassal. And so the lord, for whatever reason, has more power and ability and resources, and they offer protection, they offer land to the inferior, and the vassal, in return for protection, in return for land, they offer to fight for them, to serve them in battle, to farm and manage the land for them. And so what it is the coming together of mutual assistance. Each has something that the other side wants that's going to allow them to survive this period of chaos. It's a way of cementing this relationship between the lord and their vassal, or the superior and their inferior. They have three key steps. One is homage, the other one is the oath of fealty, and the last is investiture. Homage is just the act of submission to the lord. We have that depicted here in a medieval picture, where the vassal is down bowing to the lord, again depicted with a crown. Doesn't necessarily mean they're a king. And they're saying, I will serve you, I will farm your land, I will fight for you, I'll be loyal to you. Okay, because again, this is kind of a world of chaos, Mad Max, Walking Dead kind of thing. And they want to know who are my friends, who are my enemies when things go crazy, when the next Germanic tribe comes in, who's going to protect us. The vassal is swearing submission or to the submitting to the Lord, and they would use this by a lot of times by bowing down and clasping their hands together. The Lord with his hands on the outside of the vassals, and that's actually where we get this idea of praying with our hands together. Is this act of submission to our ultimate, us as the vassal, to the ultimate Lord, God in heaven. It's a reenactment of that homage. And then that oath of fealty ceremony is when they would actually swear to the Lord and recite an oath that I promise to fight for you, I promise to protect you, I promise never to betray you until I die. And then investiture was then what the Lord would return down to the vassal, and that was they would give them a gift known as fiefs. And it'd be some sort of sign of their provision for them, that they can usually with some real practical use. It could be, I'm going to give you a fiefdom of land, I'm going to give you a war horse, all these things listed, a sword, armor, I'm going to give you an office within our village, I'm going to put you in charge of collecting taxes. A fief was basically a job or a resource that, again, they provided that, and then the vassal provided the service in return. And again, it was a lifelong promise and relationship unless disloyalty, it was dissolved by unfaithfulness on either part. It really is, we're going to talk about contracts in a minute, or until death. And again, all of this was kind of recreating the bonds of society and relationship in a situation where there was no government to establish that. This is just, again, a walkthrough or a slide that you can review that gives you details of it. Again, the homage ceremony, you can see him bowing there with the hands clasped, as I was describing. Then you have the swearing next. So you see there, the oath of fealty actually involved the laying of the hands on the Bible. This was a biblical system of promises and again, mutual assistance. And then you have the investiture. That is the giving of the gift, investing something in the vassal as a symbol of their relationship. Okay, and so then what it develops is this idea of a feudal hierarchy, and you have a king was really just the top lord, and then you might have, it's got barons, knights, and villains. Don't worry too much about those specific names, but basically you would have serfs, and they would have lords, and then that lord might even be a vassal of a more powerful lord, and that lord might even be a vassal of a more powerful lord, and so you kind of have even lords of lords, kings of kings, This is where, again, you see that idea in Scripture. Um, and you can see, again, the king or the higher up would usually grant land. It says land multiple times there. Again, it could oftentimes be land, but a lot of times it was other resources like we listed on the previous slide. Whereas the lower classes, again, they could be providing food, they could be providing military support. If they're a powerful lord themselves, they might even be providing funding or some of their own knights and vassals to support the higher king. So again, a pledge of mutual assistance that again kind of began to recreate a new hierarchy of society following, again, this is the after the fall of Rome. So part two is then that's kind of the political system. That's how people began to organize themselves politically. And you had a lot of fractured, small, not even, I won't even use the word kingdom yet, but basically regions and territories ruled by different lords. And again, some more dominant than others. Others just, it was very decentralized. You don't have, again, the idea of empires or kingdoms yet. But then economically, if the system that develops along with this is called manorialism. And that is the idea that rather than having cities or nations, you basically had little units of community around what's called the manor, or again, a village community. And it's ruled by a lord and then farmed and run by and served by his various serfs. And a lot of times this would be all of the land that the lord somehow had come to control and then was able to parcel out to his various serfs to farm and work on. And so this is how, again, we'll keep detailing this in a second, known as manorialism. So a serf might be given a certain amount of land to cultivate, and then he would then just provide a percentage, kind of like a tax, to the lord, and then whatever was left over he got to use for his own family. Same thing, you'd be out there farming, and then if there was ever a threat or a danger, the lord could come out and say, all right, I need everybody to suit up. We're going to go out and fight or defend the kingdom or go serve this other cause. And then the Lord in return was, I'm going to manage things. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to provide the land. I'm going to build the walls. I'm going to make sure we have enough knights or we have enough people ready to protect our domain. And so you kind of, rather than have these massive nations or even these empires or even kingdoms, you just have these little village communities with their own little keep or fort, their lands. Here's a picture right here. You got the manor house, which is the central house, but then you've got a place for baking, a blacksmith, the mill for grinding the grain. You got a barn, you got a church, the houses, and then you've got the various, again, orchard, forest for hunting, a meadow for grazing, and then of course the fields there at the bottom. And so it's kind of this own little self-contained community, again, and that's your world. Your world is that manor, manorialism. And again, you have the acting out of the feudalism within that manor. And again, because this isn't a place where, we're going to go traveling or we're going to have international trade. No, it's too dangerous of a time. It's too broken down of a time, too chaotic. You're going to create these little self-contained bubbles of safety along the manor. And so, yeah. And again, just another depiction of those various units of manorialism during the medieval ages. Okay, third, custom and contract. So what were some of the big ideas from feudalism and manorialism? One, there is no centralized law system. And so in other words, in terms of what happened to law during this period, is it becomes the idea of each little manor, each little community is going to be making up their own laws. Basically, a lord would set the rules for all of the serfs and the people of his village or community. And he, wasn't something they voted on. It was something that he just declared or he established. But that community, each little community becomes the source of right and wrong. It's not some sort of top-down, this is, they are Christians, we'll get to that, but it's not like there's a higher law code or a king or a ruler establishing things. It's pretty much, okay, what works for this community? What is going to keep it together? What's going to keep it safe? What's going to protect us? Those were the laws that developed, and we call that kind of from the bottom up, not from the top down. And that's referred to as common law. That's going to be really important in future lessons. But what develops is this law through tradition and custom, through practical development, not from an above ruler, not from even in a sense a divine gift revelation, but simply from how are we going to survive? What works? What's practical? And that those practices become this huge body of law. But again, it comes from just the bottom up of people just living in what works versus it coming down from some sort of centralized government. Also, the idea of contract in that what's binding here is that. Sorry, my picture is just going to cover some of this up. That's okay. You know what it says. Um, it's that the oath of fealty, the homage, and the investiture. Those were sacred moments because that's all that the promise, the contract, was what kept these little societies going. It was a binding agreement between two. This wasn't slavery, although the serfs many times didn't have a lot of rights and they were tied to the land, and it was for life, and they would pass it on to their kids. Not saying it was glorious or anything, but it was a contract. Each had something to fulfill, and if either side didn't fulfill their part of the bargain, the contract could be dissolved and everyone might end up going their separate ways. Excuse me. This is going to be important when we get to eventually, this is going to expand and this is going to create larger nations or kingdoms. And we're going to get the kingdoms of Europe eventually to emerge. But it's going to be important that the foundation of it was this feudal contract of you are the ruler, but you owe us something as ruler. We are the subjects and we owe you something as subjects, but we are in agreement with each other and each side has to fulfill their part of the bargain. That's going to be important when we talk about kingship later on, as this basic feudal society begins to expand and grow more powerful. The other thing that regulated the society, besides custom, besides contract, is this idea of chivalry, the code of chivalry, and that was kind of the moral aspect of the medieval society. You have the political, which is feudalism. You have the economic, which is manorialism. And then you have chivalry, which is moral. How do we behave? What's right and wrong? What are the virtues that men or women or leaders or subjects should aspire to? And this really gets developed by the church, taking Christian doctrine, taking some of the Germanic or pagan practices, kind of morph into a code of chivalry of how you should behave. And the church really encouraged this as a way of kind of Christianizing and taming kind of the warlike and tribal hostilities between the Germanic peoples of Europe. And so it was chivalry, kind of this taming influence brought on by the church to kind of curb and develop virtuous behavior. It had three areas of focus, chivalry, and that is one, your duty to your countrymen and your fellow Christians, and emphasizing things as you see there: mercy, courage, valor, fairness, protection of the weak in battle. You had a duty to God. So again, it was a religious based. It was coming from the church. You need to be faithful. You need to be pious. You need to protect the church and the innocent. You can see whether that's divine or not. So it was kind of self-serving of the church to say, okay, your main job is to protect the church and these people. And then of course there was also this duty to women. Again, to kind of, from a biblical perspective, to treat women of equal value. And you have this idea of courtly love, or the honor that should be shown a woman, gentleness, graciousness, the idea of courtly love, even the idea of romance, that you would be romantic and try to woo a woman. That's really born during this the Middle Ages, the love songs of the troubadours. That is a Christian principles beginning to be inculcated in these Germanic cultures, and the status of women really was elevated due to this chivalric Christian influence. So again, general countrymen and Christians to God, and then the treatment of women were three central areas of one's code of chivalry. Okay, so what? Feudalism. What's the big ideas? Big takeaway: feudalism provides the law and order during a period of breakdown. Okay, again, it's the catastrophe movie. All the normal things governing society are gone. Might now makes right. Anything can happen. There's no, oh, you broke the law. Who's the law? Who's going to enforce the law? It doesn't matter. Just do whatever you want. Feudalism begins to reestablish political, economic, and moral behavior, as I was describing. It's a key moment of decentralization, from the centralization of the entire Roman Empire under the view of the emperor, the one-man rule. Now, all of a sudden, there's lords and lords and lords and lords, and this fiefdom and that kingdom and all these different groups, and they're always in flux and changing. It's very decentralized. There is no one person, no one people, nothing in control. The closest that comes to that is the church. But in these early years, the church is very weak, and we'll be talking about the growing power of the church. Also, when we're talking about law and custom and contract, what was once formal and codified and clear, and hey, let's look up how to do this. Let's look up what the law code. What did Justinian say? What did Octavian say? Now it's personal. Hey, what actually works? What do we here in our little manor agree to? What have we decided? What have we worked out? And so that's going to be important, because now all the decision making is being spread out among more people, And the development of culture is also being spread out among different cultures. And you're going to see a greater diversity. And again, kind of this bottom up to society versus, oh, there's this ruling authority that's imposing beliefs down on the people. And the contracts, this idea of feudalism is a contract, an agreement. It's not democratic. Again, it's not like they're voting. It's not like these serfs had a lot of rights. It was not something I would sign up for, seeing the benefits of our, democracy today. But you can begin to see at the seeds of freedom and rights. The idea that, yes, you were a serf, but you did have rights. And yes, he is the king, but he has obligations. And also a freedom in that, hey, we as a community, we get to decide what works. We get to decide the customs. We get to decide the laws. We get to take the Bible and say, okay, what does that mean, and how should that inform how we should live? And so when you hear decentralization, you have more freedom because you are being able to make your own independent decisions and form kind of your own society the way that suits you and your circumstances. So in those, we're going to be talking more about that, but in those two ideas, freedom and rights, or in feudalism and manorialism and chivalry, we have the seedbed of future ideas of freedom and rights that's going to come to dominate Western civilization. Okay, look forward to talking to you guys in class, and I will see you soon. Praise the Lord. Oh, take me a minute.